And let me explain the basics of that process. One of the first tasks is to understand what our current congregation is looking for in a minister. You've already received a link to a survey on this topic. The last time I checked, which was yesterday, only 38 out of a possible 98 people have responded to that survey. I hope if you've not responded that you do it soon, because we'll be using that data when we meet again in July. And my guess is Christy will probably send the link out again one more time to help you out with that. We will use that information and what we learned from today's service to put together a job description for the position. And although I have not read all the comments, one thing I found very interesting is that many of you stated that what was important to you was an experienced UU minister. Given that Susan was not experienced and was not a UU, that sort of surprised me because most people said they loved her. But that's why we ask. This congregation is different than it was 5 years ago when we wrote the job description that eventually got us Susan. While we are working on collecting the information about the minister, we are starting to fill out the congregational profile on the UUA job posting site. This is where all UU ministers go to look for jobs. To complete the profile, we have to fill out specific details on finances, membership, history, demographic makeup of the congregation. It also requests information on the community, which is obviously an interesting thing for us since we have members across 6 counties. We will be working with the board to determine what we can afford in the way of salary and benefits. The UUA has many resources to assist us in this decision, but it is clear that we cannot afford more than a part-time minister. I'm hoping that we can complete all of the required information to actually post the job in September. And we do have the option to advertise locally. There might be another person like Susan who is retired to the area but is interested in a part-time job. So now it's time that we start our discussion. We have some specific questions we'd like for you to answer. Hugo will be taking a group into the fellowship hall. I will be staying here in the sanctuary. Feel free to go with Hugo if you prefer to work with a smaller group. Also, we will have designated scribes for each group to ensure we capture your thoughts. They also will be documenting any questions that you have that we cannot answer here. So let's get started. Christy went with it. Which one of you going to decide to stay here or one go? Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. And you need to be in the other room.
In the other room?
Yeah.
Okay, Janet, may I ask you a question?
Sure.
When we first started this process, there was an option, or at least I thought there would be, for not having a minister, just going back to the lake. Did that ever occur? Did we have a vote? I'm for a minister, but I just want to...
The protocol in UUA is if you're bringing your first minister in, it requires a congregational vote. It does not require a congregational vote to continue with the minister. However, I did put it to a vote with the board, and I did listen to all of you talking about how soon can we get another minister and who are we going to be looking. So we went ahead and proceeded with this process. We will have a congregational vote before we would actually bring somebody in. So
Thank you.
we believe it's worth exploring. If we don't find anybody, we may be laid left for a few more years. The first question we have, and this is probably not the kind of thing you expected us to ask, why did you come to our congregation?
I can answer because it's an off the wall. I was going to Unity churches, or services actually, they didn't have a church. And Richard Bunch from the Unitarian Universalist in Richmond, the pastor there at the time, was doing a speech talk on something about Jesus, and I can't remember what it was, but I thought, well, that's a really weird combination of words. So I came to listen to him, and I walked in, and I felt at home.
I'm attracted because it's a very welcoming congregation. I think probably the most welcoming in the whole area.
Came because of Penny. We lived in the same neighborhood and walked together often in the morning. The reason I keep saying that is because that shows you how important one-to-one is.
I came because of the lay presentations. People don't like this, but I don't think I've ever remembered anything out of a sermon. And so I like the topics that are timely and thought-provoking and what have you.
Janet?
In the early 90s, when I was living in Richmond, I had friends that belonged to the Unitarian Church there, and I accompanied them a couple of times and got really impressed. They had a huge choir, and when they sang a song, everybody clapped afterwards, and I was amazed. And I also liked the fact that they were very diverse, and they welcomed everybody.
Should we clap to you?
I came here because it wasn't. And we're very pleased with what has been put together.
For those of you who don't know, Tom was a founding member of this congregation.
Well, we've been Unitarian since 1972 when our son was born, because we wanted to go to a congregation we could attend together because our beliefs were different. And it was wonderful when we started coming here for weekends and discovered the group meeting at the Women's Club. It was terrific. And the people were wonderful, and the lay-led presentations were wonderful. So it's been a great joy.
One of the reasons I came was for community. At the time, I was a primary caregiver of my late husband, and the only people I knew in this area, because I've been consulting in Chicago and New York and places, were medical professionals. I knew people in every hospital around, but I really did not have any friends in the area. And my husband, being the very practical person that he was, said, "You're going to need friends." And he said, "We need to go join a church." He was Episcopalian, I was Methodist, but my parents had joined a Unitarian church in Dallas, and so we came and started joining here. Anyone else for that question? Okay, next question. Why did you stay?
I promise not to go first next time.
It's okay. Or maybe somebody's got you.
I lied too, you know. So I went to Unity because I didn't know anybody here. And how do you meet people? You go to church, and I'd gone to Unity up in Northern Virginia. And as I said, when I came here, I felt at home. I mean, I walked in, and you know, when you go to a church the first time, you don't really know how people dress. And I was raised Catholic, and so it was a little bit formal. But I saw everything. I saw shorts and burkies, and I saw classy dressing, very, very, and everything in between. And I thought, okay, you know, and then, so right off the bat, nobody's the same. You know, we're not following a code. We get to fit in how we choose. And the services and the people were the same. Everybody made me feel very welcome. And I learned, and I met people, and then I saw them elsewhere, and I went, where do I know you from? and everybody's just been so nice and so welcoming, like others said.
I think it's the fellowship. I mean, everybody just gets along so well. We enjoy each other's differences in how we think and all of that. And it can get lonely down here in the Northern Neck sometimes too. So this is kind of like a sanctuary for me to come out and see people. Thank you.
To answer the first question, I came initially to hear Bob Weekly, who's been a friend of mine for years. And then I came to hear Susan. And I know many of you feel I only came to hear Susan. Well, that was true. However, I continue to come because I'm starting to feel the warmth of community and welcoming. And I further specifically enjoy the conversation and discussions that we have. Thank you.
Would say that,
Well, I came because, well, this is the third region I've lived in where, there's been a UU church, and I've really enjoyed UU church in Fredericksburg and in Northern Virginia, and the different perspectives and different ideas and how different things are accepted and appreciated. And I stayed, well, it does get lonely in the Northern Neck. And also it's nice to have a place where my daughter can learn about things. And she really likes what she learns in Sunday school and the joys and concerns.
Thank you. Like Penny, when I first walked in the door, and because of Penny, we walked in the door, but I was home. I don't need to define it. I was home. And the reason I stayed is because it was genuine.
talking about the kids liking joys and concerns, sometimes their joys and concerns are almost the whole hour. They like it so much.
Well, I keep coming back because this is a place where I feel comfortable with people who generally think the same way I do. And the only other place I've found that is in my Tai Chi class.
And one of the reasons I stayed, in addition to the welcoming, was that at that time my husband was starting to have some disabilities and some challenges doing things, and they were getting ready to have a yard sale. And Hank Stupai was running it, and he said, come and help us at the yard sale. And Cliff said, I don't think I can do anything. You know, he couldn't get up and lift things and that kind of stuff. And Hank thought a second, he said, you're the treasurer. And he was, and he stayed for the whole yard sale doing that, and we met so many people during that process that we enjoyed it. Next one is a fill in the blank. In the last ministry, being the time of the 5 years that Susan was here, I wish our congregation had more
songs that I knew what I was singing sometimes.
I do think a broader religious education program for adults, classes or certain topics to pursue would be a good addition. And a youth program, we need youth for the youth program, but someday maybe we'll have that. But I would say the only thing that I think is missing is religious education outside our just the service center.
Of course, I would say more members. That's my years of being membership chair coming out. Okay, the next one. In the last ministry, I wish our congregation had less. Fill in the blank.
I'm answering this way because I should have answered the previous question. I wish our congregation had less lack of diversity.
That is certainly one of the questions we have to answer on the UUA profile, is what kind of diversity.
We have many different perspectives, and some of those perspectives are not as respected as they should be. And I think that's an opportunity to improve. Another thing was, I think one of the primary objectives or characteristics we look for is optimism. Optimism in the minister. Optimistic character and outlook. None of this woe is us, we're all depressed type expressions. The world is so much better than it was even just 30 years ago. And optimism breeds optimism. And a can-do attitude is critical.
Put my 2 cents in here. One of the things I wish we had more of is people willing to take on leadership roles. And we're all busy. Some of us have kids, some of us have parents we're dealing with. But this church only survives by the volunteers that step up and do the work, and even more so now that we're lay-led.
I would like to address that if I could.
Sure.
I'm not nearly as articulate as Eddie is, so I write this stuff up, and otherwise I get distracted and off in some other areas. Then the second of 3 things that I think are important is encouraging a vision of UUFR's future described in some detail, and a minister that is willing to help keep our eyes on that future. Because enthusiasm gathers around an exciting vision of where we are headed, and members are then inspired to get involved to help us achieve that future. That was a pattern that we had followed for the last 15, 18 years, so that everyone had at least a detailed identification or detailed description of where we were headed. And people would say, yeah, I want to help us get there. And I think that's become foggier recently.
Anything else?
What do you hope never changes in our congregation?
The love. The love.
Discussion.
To hear you have a voice.
You said here you have a voice.
I would say the lay topics. I hope that never changes.
Well, I was going to say this earlier, but I first came because we had the coincidence of sharing a table at Lancaster Players with the Weeklies. And that's how we met them. And so they said, come, and since we had had some experience with Unitarianism, we came. And I have to say, I came originally because I like ideas and I like to hear discussion and so forth. But what I really found was that, in addition to that, people have values here that I admire, and they don't just talk about them, they actually have them. And therefore, we have an environment where we have this wonderful exchange here, and virtually no one gets mad. I mean, people might get a little passionate, but I don't think I've ever heard an angry voice in this fellowship. which is pretty remarkable.
What do you think could be improved with a fresh perspective and energy? Everything. Seriously.
Music.
Good point.
Music.
Music, yes.
Can you explain what you mean by that? What would be a good idea to change in terms of music?
I have to harken back to the Hank and Nancy show, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
That was the most enthusiastic, enjoyable reason I came many times. Unitarians are not noted for having wonderful music. They're noted for the opposite, unfortunately.
I appreciate that, I understand.
The Hank and Nancy show got old for me. The way they got away from the hymns. I did enjoy the music, but I felt that they were, anyway, I just, I prefer what Eva does to what Hank and Nancy did. But anyway, music would be a good thing if you can find somebody to help you with.
Other thoughts? This is how I get my steps in on Sunday.
Something that I've experienced at other UU churches, which I think would be really wonderful if anybody would be interested, is having at least like a once a month kind of musicians meetup that we could maybe learn a hymn and play it together. And something that I've really enjoyed seeing and experiencing at UU has been the diversity of musical instruments. My first service I attended, there was somebody playing a banjo, a violin, and it was really wonderful.
Want to share what you currently do in weekly music? I don't know because I don't go to that one.
We have a monthly meeting we call Making Music, and we're trying to upgrade our learning of hymns, but unfortunately, when we originally planned it for once a month, it really only takes care of 1 or 2 sessions. So, yeah, I appreciate that. We used to play here, violin and viola, but we're old now and stiff, and we can't do that, but I agree, but, well, we're working on it.
And certainly I would say if any of you play instruments and wish to play the gathering music, the offertory music, that sort of thing, we welcome that. I know some visitor last week was sort of surprised when we had a bagpipe playing during gathering music. But I think music is something, and singing is something that people enjoy. I know for me, even though I may be off tune occasionally, it is a joyous thing to sing, and I always like it when we have a song that I actually know.
So when I first started coming here, Hank and Diana and other people gathered once a month, and it was a jam session. We had songbooks that weren't church songbooks, which have since disappeared, unfortunately. And it was just like whoever was there, what do we want to sing next? You know, and it was just a gathering of people who enjoyed making music in whatever form. And after a while, it got down just to the 3 of us, and 2 of us were away, and it just sort of faded after that. But yeah.
Any other ideas of things you'd like to see new, renewed energy, that sort of thing? Very quiet groove. Okay. All right, I've finished with our defined questions, but now I just want to open it up to what are your thoughts about how we are looking for a new minister? What do you want to be sure we think about? What do you want to be sure we don't do? You know, I've heard some people say, and I agree, don't bring somebody who all they want to do is preach on Sunday, because we want variety, and we want non-religious people up talking about important things to us. But is there anything else that you want the committee to consider?
This is my third item and last. And it speaks to some of the other questions you have. In our selection, merit beats identity issues when it comes to getting the job done. Merit reflected in past accomplishments regardless of identity. Even Harvard is dropping the DEI fad, diversity, equity, and inclusion, which data shows has not panned out. We intentionally placed this church in this neighborhood and likely generated some enthusiasm among our neighbors here that somehow we use would be attentive to their circumstances. Merit and talent can help meet that expectation. A few lots to the west of us, the owners are under the threat of tax sale. There are 4 more parcels along Newtown Road that have shown up on the delinquent taxes. Tash Williams Home Daycare, about 300 yards to the northwest, did not renew her license, likely due to the onus of intrusive regulations. Yet she still cares for neighborhood children. Yes, we have spent $350,000 on an addition and not yet labeled our playground a community playground open to all kids in the neighborhood. Can we indeed team up with Mount Vernon Church to do more? A minister of high merit could be very helpful.
Something, going back to what we should be doing. I don't think that we blow our own horn enough. I don't think there's enough news about this congregation and the stuff that's done and the good things that are done. Tom, the Surveyor's Fellowship. I mean, I really think we ought to have a front page ad in that, not ad, but an article in the local newspaper for some of that stuff. And I think we need to point that out, because if you're going to grow, you're going to have people knowledgeable enough of what you're doing.
We do get the scholarships usually in both the Rappahannock Record and the Southside Sentinel.
The scholarship announcements have gone to the newspaper in the last few days, so
Yeah.
there'll be a big thing with all the pictures.
Catherine's been putting things in the paper too.
Yeah, we've had quite a few things. Where they go is the editor's choice, obviously. And I'd say, are probably not at the very top of his list of people to promote, but we have been successful in getting quite a few articles in there.
But there's room for a lot better jobs.
Yes, there's more work that can be done.
I really admire what Belinda does with the children. I think they've made incredible contact with people with their lemonade and snack stands. And the story of the gentleman who couldn't afford anything, when he came out, they gave him cookies anyway. I don't know how that would fit in with an adult take on things. I really admire what she has done with the kids.
And she started that by just walking around the neighborhood and knocking on doors.
Really?
It's awesome.
And she did go over to Mount Vernon and talk to them, and one of their responses was, we don't have kids either, you know?
And Mike built that, that playground. And that playground should be feeding all the kids, or should be supporting.
What about liability issues?
Liability issues.
Liability issues. Maybe just a sign?
You know, don't get all hung up on liability and stuff. We got that's all covered on insurance. And that stops too many people from doing what really is a good thing.
Yeah, I certainly am for reaching out to the community more. I agree with Tom. As far as the future minister, goes. My own preference is not to worry about credentials as much as personality, and whether that person is warm and sensitive and can, reach out to people. And I hope that person doesn't have some hidden theological agenda, to convince us of something. I mean, they no doubt have their own spiritual path, which is fine. But I think we've done very well with accepting people who come from very different directions. And we don't have a stamp on the fellowship that says this is, kind of what we believe deep down, or the minister doesn't do that. Although I fully expect that person will have some beliefs. I hope they do. I just don't want that person to try to impose them on the rest of us.
What Eddie said. Also inclusive, and I had another word, but I was listening and it sort of slipped away. But I think it has to be an open personality, a welcoming personality. That's what Susan brought, what she expanded. I mean, we had it, but she blew it up like a giant balloon. And I think that's really critical.
Yeah.
I would appreciate if the committee, I realize we don't know who's going to express an interest in our job, but I would hope that the committee will give the congregation some options, perhaps if we have some, hopefully, that we get a chance to have the potential speakers come, potential ministers come and speak, which I think we have in the past. I'm not sure how that worked out with Susan and Jim because of their history of having been here. But I would like us to be able to have a chance to interact with these people at least once, but maybe twice if it's possible, before we make a decision. And I would like to see a sort of a broad spectrum of age groups represented. So that's what I'm asking the committee to consider.
Some further discussion of, it's part-time, and where are you? So I think the challenge we're going to have is getting a minister for a liberal religion to come to a part-time job in a rural conservative county.
Right.
So we may get 0 people responding to our ad, or we may have 5 and we whittle it down to a few that we think are worthwhile. And that's why I said we have already talked to the UUA about we want to, put something in the local papers because we believe that's certainly as good a possibility as it is to go through the UUA posting site. And they were, fine with that. That's your congregation's capability. You can do that if you wish.
You might go wider than just local papers. I mean, to our source populations of future retirees, DC, Norfolk, Richmond.
Folks that like to come to the water.
So just what you said, folks that like to come to the water. Well, there's an awful lot of water-themed magazines out there. Boating magazines and other kinds.
I think
we're considering.
Sorry.
I'm done.
I think it might be a good idea. I don't know exactly how we do it, but it seems to me an ideal person would be a retired UU minister who wanted a quiet life near the water. So maybe if we told some of the real estate agents what was going on, they would catch someone that might be interested.
Yeah. And certainly, you all are out there in the community all the time too. And if you find somebody who has moved in next door or wherever, who is a retired minister or theologian, as you remember when Susan came, she had never been a minister before. She was a director of religious education for many years, had a divinity degree, but had not actually been a minister. So I think this group is very open. As someone said here, credentials are not as important as the spirit and the welcoming, which is something that we all, I think, feel is a critical part of this community. I am going to ask Tom if you would tell Hugo we need to wrap up, and he's got a group in the other room.
Wasn't
You don't have to
Lee in
run,
Washington
honey,
at one time too?
Go talk to you.
No, but wasn't Lee in Washington not at one time? She wasn't anything to do with Unitarian, was she?
Oh,
Well, she's
she
now.
was Jewish for a while,
Yes,
and she was a lawyer.
Yes.
And she now has her own congregation.
Yes, that's what I mean.
Yes,
There's
so
somebody
people-
out there. He's
people
got to
come
find them.
Could you explain to me what the process is? Because Susan was a Presbyterian.
Yep.
And what did she have to go through to become a Unitarian minister? And what I'm asking is, what would be the transition from, say, another mainline Protestant or even Catholic to say, hey, I want to come be your...
Well, first of all, they had to pass the committee. And we did ask Susan a whole lot of questions about that. You know, why was she not a minister in the Presbyterian world that she lived in? Why was she interested in coming to UU? What about the values she was interested in? So there was a lot of that. Now, when you are a non-UU coming into a UU church, you have the option to try to do the work to become a fellow UU minister, which is a long, long task. And that was something that Susan thought she wanted to do and started on it. It requires a lot of reading, a lot of workshops, an interim position or an intern kind of position that she did in Richmond. It also requires going before a group of people and having an oral exam sort of thing. Once she had got started on that and then we had COVID hit, she decided that was probably not the best use of her time because there was hours and hours. And a congregation has the ability, which is what we did with Susan, to ordain her ourselves. So we said, we believe you have enough of the theology background and you have enough of the values of UU, and we are comfortable with what you've done, that we will ordain you ourselves. So that's how she became a reverend. So we have that option. But it's certainly something that the ministerial committee will do the first sort of check to be sure they aren't just looking for a job, to sort of keep them busy, you know, while they're here voting during the but we all felt that Susan was extremely sincere in her belief that she was not so much a Presbyterian as she was a UU. She just didn't realize it at first.
I think that it might be valuable to remind everyone that we are an independent entity, that we have decided to be associated with UUA. I've heard some words about, could we do this? We were given this option. We have the option of running this thing just as we best can. And no one is dictating what we have to do. When you get to things like, is a potential minister qualified within UUA to be in their ministerial organization, that's where the UUA gets involved. But we are responsible for what happens here, and we have a wide flexibility of doing whatever we think is going to work best.
Yes, and I think that that's one of the values that I see in UUA, which I didn't when we first started, is they have a whole heck of a lot of resources. That if you are a church who contributes to the UUA, you have access to those resources, a lot of programs and that sort of thing. But they don't dictate how we do it. Susan held a new UU and UUFR class a while back. She took the major categories that were in the UUA doctrine, and then we just had people from within our church talk about some of those and how we did it here. So, we do have lots of flexibility. You don't have to do things the UUA way, but sometimes they're very helpful.
Expanding a little bit on what Tom and Janet have said, my experience with people in the UU church is that following the guidelines, and there's the guidelines of the selection of ministers, has an effect more on the ministers than it has on the church. And we had experienced a friend who was wanted to become kind of a UU minister. He not got through the process, was ordained by the church. He was served, local church served, and then was unable to go through the UUA process to find employment elsewhere. He was ordained. So the restrictions are more on the minister side than it is for the church side.
And like any large organization, there are lots of rules. But certainly, some of the things we are following, their questions, their process, we post a job, they've been involved in hiring hundreds and hundreds of ministers, and we have been involved in hiring one. So we're using that process. We can choose to not answer any of the questions that we don't think are valid or put, NA or whatever, and that is something we certainly have done on some of this. But we will continue to try to fill out as much as we can, because that's what helps a person know what it's like to come here, to be a part of this organization. And I think we've got our other group coming back here.
You're the delinquents.
The delinquents.
We were told to return.
You know me, order, structure,